Disrespect is never accidental. It may be dressed as a joke. It may arrive cloaked in sarcasm, followed by, "Relax, I'm only kidding." But beneath the smirk, beneath the harmless tone, is always the same strategy: measurement. They aren't mocking you, they're measuring you. And if you respond with laughter, awkward silence, or explanation, they've already learned what they came to learn. Stop here if you're still trying to be liked, but if you're here to be respected, keep listening. This will change the way you respond forever. Most people lose power because they assume disrespect is a moment. Machiavelli knew better. Disrespect is not an insult, it's a signal, a public announcement of power misalignment. And how you respond in that moment doesn't just shape your image, it defines the value of your presence. Disrespect is social currency being exchanged in real time. When someone throws a jab at you in public and you ignore it to keep the peace, the room doesn't register your humility, they register your value loss. Because every interaction is judged by the same unconscious rule: who controls the vibe controls the power. Watch how a disrespectful person behaves. They're never looking at you. They're watching how others react to how you respond. Think about that. The crowd isn't laughing because the line was clever. They're laughing because you looked uncomfortable, because you explained yourself, because you tried to level the dynamic instead of ending it. In that moment, you became safe to make fun of, safe to exclude, safe to devalue. If you're still listening, you're not here for etiquette. You're here for dominance, without drama. Let's begin. Machiavelli wrote that in a court full of rivals, the most dangerous man wasn't the one who spoke most eloquently. It was the one who remained unreadable, silent, present, but unknown. This wasn't cowardice. This was terrifying. Because the unknowable is untouchable. If you are emotionally reactable, if you are eager to correct, clarify, and explain, you open yourself to 1,000 strategic cuts. But the man who doesn't move, the man who doesn't answer, he creates a vacuum where people insert their fears, not their respect. Make your silence unsettling. Don't laugh nervously when someone crosses a boundary. Don't correct tone with tone. Don't match energy. Withdraw your energy like oxygen in a burning room and let them choke on their misplaced confidence. If you've ever felt the air shift after one of your silences, that wasn't coincidence, that was command. Disrespect is rarely loud at first. It always begins indirectly. A passive joke, a subtle dismissal, a backhanded compliment. And if you're like most people, your instinct is to correct the record. That instinct is the trap. The moment you defend yourself, you agree to the frame someone else designed, that you are beneath them, that you need to justify something. If you enter a frame someone else created, even winning the argument is losing the war. Instead, freeze the field. Hold your response. The powerful do not sprint toward offense. They pause and impose a new frame. You don't say, "That's not true." You say, "Interesting angle. Is that how you usually see people?" Or, "You should write that down. That's brave." You're not defending the insult. You're forcing them to defend their own reflection. You're not avoiding the game. You're rewriting it. If they disrespected you in front of others, there's only one rule. Never restore equilibrium behind closed doors. Educate through presence. Show the room. Machiavelli believed public consequences were not punishment. They were preventative medicine. Not cruel, not loud, just visible. You don't seek revenge. You adjust your tone, your gaze, your engagement in front of the same people who witnessed the attack. You're not hostile. You're absent. physically present, energetically gone. That's the part their ego wasn't prepared for. Not opposition, but indifference. Not defense, but deletion. And the room, it feels it. Suddenly, silence becomes tension, and your withdrawal, it spreads. Now your new posture becomes the example, and without saying a word, you've turned social warfare into classroom policy.
Here's something they never expect. When someone disrespects you, they want one of three reactions: rage, retribution, or retreat. But the one response they don't plan for is exposure. You pause, you hold the room, and you say something deceptively simple like, "I'm curious, would you say that if the dynamic was flipped?" Or, "Did you need attention, or was that the best you had?" You've said 6 words, maybe less, and they've started shrinking. Now they're reacting, clarifying, backpedaling. And you? You said almost nothing. That's cold power. That's surgical control. Everyone respects a strong response, but no one believes it until it stays consistent. One great moment of silence, one shift in posture, all of it gets erased if you go soft again a week later. Respect isn't granted for a moment of strength. It's locked in through pattern recognition. You don't restore a boundary by demanding it twice. You restore it by never needing to say it again. Here's how the powerful reframe a relationship after they've been disrespected. They don't explain the boundary. They become its physical embodiment. No grand speeches, no, "I just want to be honest with you." You simply move different. Your tone shortens. Your response time stretches. Your warmth evaporates. Your schedule becomes structured, not available. They ask, "Are you mad?" You say, "Not at all. Everything's exactly how it should be." That is merciless mercy. No dragging them through guilt, no revenge, just reality redistributed. And now, your consequence lives rent-free in the dynamic. Some people keep testing, and this is their final mistake. You've enforced the boundary, you've withdrawn the warmth, you've remained poised under pressure, and then they try again subtly. A fake compliment, a public smile with private venom, a whispered jab. Some people don't respond to shame, they respond to erasure. That's your last move. Not repetition, transcendence. You don't block them, you don't blast them, you rise above their frequency so clearly they start to question whether they ever had a place near yours. They send a message, it's left unseen. They speak around you, you nod, politely distant. They want back in, but the gravity has already shifted. You're no longer someone they joke with. You're the one they think twice about before mentioning anything near. That is the final stage. You're no longer protecting yourself, you're transforming what you represent, not through rage, not through reaction, but through posture, movement, control, all wrapped in silence. Disrespect doesn't disappear when you demand respect. It disappears when you become the kind of person that disrespect fears touching. Let them talk. Let them guess. You won't explain, you won't correct, you won't respond. You'll just disappear. And that silence is what they'll remember forever. Some people won't be stopped by silence. They don't care about approval. They thrive on disrupting peace and destabilizing energy. They live for the response. So when these personalities meet someone like you, someone who responds without flinching, someone who pauses before speaking, someone who disappears mid-conflict and returns colder, not louder, they escalate.
But that's when you make your most powerful shift. You stop playing emotional chess and you begin orchestrating social checkmate. You escalate without emotion. And you upgrade from boundary setting to frame control. Now you're using their own disrespect against them, not through rage, but through exposure. You say, "That's bold. Do you use that line at work too?" You say, "If you talk to friends like that, I'd hate to hear how you talk to strangers." You say, "Interesting. I'm surprised you were confident enough to say that out loud." You're not attacking. You're not defending. You're handing the microphone back to them and letting the room hear what they really sound like. You're letting their performance play on loop just long enough to destroy the illusion. And the best part? You remain calm. You remain surgical. You remain still. Because now it's no longer about the comment. It's about who the comment revealed. They thought they were showcasing your weakness, but in the end, they signed their own social obituary. This is the Machiavellian reversal. Disrespect sets the trap for them. And all you had to do was wait. At this level, you're not surviving social dynamics. You're shaping the legend of your presence. You're teaching each room how to carry your name, how to speak around you, how to adapt when your posture stiffens, your eyes lock, and your warmth evaporates mid-sentence. That's when people realize you're not just respected, you've become someone's silence holds weight. The illusion of access is gone, and now your absence speaks louder than your voice ever could. Respect doesn't come from defending yourself. It comes from recognizing how little defense is needed when your identity enforces itself. You're no longer someone who negotiates value. Your value personified. Now people no longer test your boundary the same way. Instead, they hesitate, not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. They think, did I go too far? Why is he so quiet right now? What's she thinking? Why didn't they respond like before? That uncertainty becomes your shield, because the person they're unsure of becomes the person they become careful around. This is where power builds, not from intimidation, but from contrast. You don't always respond, but when you do, it cuts. You don't dominate the room. You soften your tone until silence reclaims the space. You don't ask for respect. You show people the cost of losing it. And for the first time, they treat your energy like something sacred. You were once reachable. Now you are selected, filtered, controlled. They wonder when you'll speak, if that warmth will ever return, if they still have a seat at your table. But you don't answer, because when someone loses access, you don't explain why. You let the weight of your absence do the talking. That is the final twist. You've stopped reacting to disrespect as if it's personal. Now you treat it as information. They insult, and you don't feel pain. You recognize weakness. They mock. You don't flinch. Because you've learned disrespect reveals them, not you. It reveals insecurity, jealousy, projection, powerlessness. Every jab thrown carelessly, that's just a flare from a person drifting further outside your gravitational pull. And instead of confronting them, you make a quiet decision. Do they still get access to you? Or do they quietly
disappear into social irrelevance. You don't chase closure. You don't document the exile. You just let distance become reality, and respect be the cost of your silence. That's how kings moved in Machiavelli's world. That's how you move now. No rage, no blow-ups, just absence. A cold removal of presence, and the realization you were never dependent on their understanding, their validation, or their permission.
At some point, they realize. They reach out, they soften, they apologize, they laugh nervously. They try to bring things back to normal, but there is no normal to return to. Why? Because you've evolved. They're interacting with a version of you that no longer exists. And here, right here, is what separates the powerful from the performative. You don't punish them. You don't destroy them. You don't need to. You just stop behaving like they matter. You show them a mercy that burns colder than punishment ever could. You remain unchanged. You remain disciplined, unbothered, unavailable. No bitterness, no drama, just distance. Not the kind that needs to be announced, but the kind that gets felt. They say something waiting for your gaze, but your eyes don't search for them anymore. They linger in your space, hoping to reignite connection, but your energy isn't theirs to match. You became cold, not because of hurt, but because you untied yourself from their importance. And that's something their ego was never designed to handle. Because deep down, people like that don't fear criticism. They fear irrelevance. What shakes them isn't being confronted. It's being forgotten by the one person they could once move. That's not cruelty. It's power, delivered in silence. And now, people talk about you. But not because of gossip, because of reputation. They say, "I've never seen him lose his cool. She's not the one to play around with." You don't want to cross them. They don't come back around. You've built a new perimeter around your presence. And now, people triple-check their tone. They parse their own words before speaking. Not because you're feared, but because you've commanded respect through restraint. You don't have to fight for boundaries anymore, because you've proven something rarer than dominance. You've mastered selective presence. You show up when you choose to. You speak when it matters. And when you leave, whether it's from a person, a room, a conversation, or a relationship, they feel it. Because the person who cannot be violated is not the one who yells the loudest. It is the one whose attention is never guaranteed again. Machiavelli would say, men must either be respected or eliminated. Modern version, either they demonstrate your value or they lose access to it forever. Not through revenge, not through punishment, but through quiet consequence. The powerful don't explain. They disappear. They ascend. They multiply silently behind closed doors while the violators fade into footnotes. And when others ask what happened, they have no answer. Because nothing was said, but everything was felt. That's how you operate now. No long explanations, no labs of correction, no proving you're the bigger person. You recognize the game for what it was, and you deleted your participation permanently. They can't respect what they can't reach. They can't provoke what no longer cares. And they can't recover from a wound inflicted by their own assumptions. You don't need approval to exist. You became untouchable, not through cruelty, not through rage, but through control. The power to control your reaction, the power to control your energy, the power to control who even sees your reaction in the first place. Now listen carefully, because there's one final move that turns presence into prophecy. Someone disrespected you, and now they realize they miscalculated. They want to reconnect, to clarify, to undo their mistake. But you don't punish, you don't reassure.
You don't say a word. You let the new reality speak for you, where your energy no longer bends, where your presence no longer adjusts, where their voice no longer lands. You let them walk through this new world alone, a world they reshaped with their own hand, a world where they no longer hold weight, a world where you're still rising without inviting them back in. And that is what true power sounds like. Not applause, not praise, but total silence. Because while they tried to provoke you, all they did was elevate you. And that is something they'll never undo. Machiavelli would call this the perfect ending, the man who doesn't need to demand respect, because everyone already knows. You only make that mistake once.